Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review as part of my Days of the Dead Convention horror movie series, or Days of the Dead Convention series period for February 2022, where I'm going to be watching movies in preparation of going to the Days of the Dead Convention in Las Vegas coming up in about just over 2 weeks now. So, if you saw my intro video, you kind of know the story, but if not, I'll give it to you a little bit at the beginning of each of these review videos. These are movies related to the people that are going to be at this convention. So, like actors, actresses in specific movies that I happen to have in my collection and either haven't seen before or I've seen but haven't reviewed on my channel before. So, I thought it would be a good time to watch and review them in preparation of going to this horror convention, Days of the Dead in Las Vegas, February 17th through the 19th. I promise I'm not on their payroll. But anyway, all that being said, we're going to take a look at the first movie um, for this particular series, and that is the original Hellraiser from 1987. Now, I have this double feature pack. I have seen both the first two movies. However, for this particular series, I'm just going to be reviewing the first movie, the original Hellraiser from 1987. That was the one that I just recently watched for this review. So, and that's because, of course, we're going to have Doug Bradley at this convention. You're also going to have Claire Higgins and Andrew Robinson, who played Uncle Frank slash Christie's dad, as well as, of course, Claire Higgins played Julia. Um, and you also have the rest of the Cenobites. I forget all their names right now, but the other three Cenobites, like Butterball and the one with the clenching teeth, and the other one, the female one. So they're all going to be there. So obviously, that's the reason why I decided to watch and review the first Hellraiser movie from 1987. So let's just go ahead and get into Hellraiser. So this is a film that I saw for the first time maybe 3, 4 years ago. So it's not like I have a long history with the Hellraiser series. I've only seen the first two movies. I know there's like 10 of them in this franchise, but Hellraiser is a 1987 British supernatural horror film written and directed by Clive Barker and produced by Christopher Figg, based on Clive Barker's 1986 novella, The Hellbound Heart, which I do want to read someday. The film marked Barker's directorial debut. Its plot involves a mystical puzzle box that summons the Cenobites, a group of extra-dimensional sadomasochistic beings who cannot differentiate between pain and pleasure. The leader of the Cenobites is portrayed by Doug Bradley and is identified in the sequels as Pinhead. So basically, the film opens in Morocco. Frank Cotton, a hedonist, buys a puzzle box said to open the door to a realm of otherworldly pleasure. At home in his bare attic, Frank solves the puzzle hooked hooked. Wait a minute now. At home in his bare attic, Frank solves the puzzle and hooked chains emerge, tearing him apart. A black robed figure resets the puzzle and the room is restored back to normal. Later, Frank's brother Larry moves into the same house. He intends to rebuild his relationship with his second wife, Julia. Larry is unaware that Julia had an affair with Frank before her marriage to him. When Larry accidentally cuts his hand moving furniture, his blood drips on the attic floor and resurrects Frank in a ghoulish form. Julia later finds Frank. Still obsessed with him, she agrees to help restore his body so that they can run away together. Julia picks up men in bars and brings them back to the attic where she mortally wounds them. Frank then drains their life, which regenerates his body. Frank explains to Julia that, having exhausted all sensory experiences, he sought out the puzzle box, which was supposed to provide access to a realm of new carnal pleasures. When the puzzle was solved, the Cenobites came to subject him to extreme sadomasochism. I'm probably pronouncing that. It's a very hard word to say for me. Sadomasochism. I'm going to go with it. So that's basically the setup and the beginning of the movie Hellraiser from 1987. As far as the cast goes, we have Claire Higgins as Julia Cotton at the convention. Ashley Lawrence is Christy Cotton. Andrew Robinson is Larry Cotton at the convention. Sean Chapman is Frank Cotton. Robert Hines is Steve. Doug Bradley is the lead Cenobite at the convention. Nicholas Vince is Shattering Cenobite at the convention. Simon Bamford as Butterball Cenobite at the convention. Grace Kirby is female Cenobite. There's a female Cenobite actress at the convention, but I don't think it's Grace Kirby. I think another actress played her in the second movie. I believe that's the one that's going to be there. And then Oliver Smith is Skinless Frank, or Frank the Monster. I stand corrected, by the way, when I said that Andrew Robinson played Larry Cotton. But he does then, and at the end of the movie, play a version of Frank, I want to say, even though it's not actually the actor that played Frank. So that's might have been a little confusing there. But yeah, anyway, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for the original Hellraiser movie from 1987. Um, so yeah, this movie, I have to say, first of all, having watched it for the first time a few years ago, I find it interesting, as I think many other people do that heard about this franchise but hadn't necessarily seen the movies, that when you think of Hellraiser, of course, you think of Pinhead, played by Doug Bradley, the main Cenobite. But actually, in this first movie, Doug Bradley's not the main character in this movie. I mean, he's really only in less than half of this movie, in essence. He comes into the movie like halfway between, and then you see him at the end a little bit. But and well, I mean, he is a decent part of the movie, but really, this movie's based on the human characters. I just find that very interesting. That it'd be like watching a Halloween movie without Michael Myers. I suppose Halloween 3, or watching a Friday the 13th movie without Jason. Well, I guess we have those movies too, but those are bad examples. My point is, when you go into Hellraiser, you think you're going to see a lot of Doug Bradley, you're going to see a lot of Pinhead, but in this first movie, that's really not the case. So I think that's the most interesting thing about this movie. Again, I can't speak to the whole series. I know he does appear more in some of the other movies, and then less some of the later movies. Um, but yeah, that's just the thing I find the most interesting about Hellraiser. As far as the movie overall goes, this is a great movie. The original. I'm just talking about the original Hellraiser movie. I'm not talking about the franchise. I'm not even talking about the second one in this particular video, even though I have seen it. But the original Hellraiser, it was very different, very different brand of horror that I think Clive Barker, for his directorial debut, just knocks out of the park. And yeah, there's just a lot of great things about the first Hellraiser. So let's just go ahead and get into them, starting with the things I really like about this movie. And I got to start with the story. I found the story in this movie, which I really wasn't expecting to have much of a story either, so that kind of surprised me. But the story is really interesting and compelling. The movie isn't just about violence and blood and gore, even though there's plenty of that in the movie. I think a lot of people going into it think that's really all the movie's going to be, but that's really not the case. This movie has a lot of humanistic themes involving forbidden love and family drama, and a theme of how far someone's willing to go for what they really want or what they're really interested in. I was really invested in this story. I wasn't bored at any point. I just thought it was very interesting and very different, but very interesting. So that's the first thing that really stuck out to me from a good standpoint. Also, the human characters are really what drives this movie. I thought they were all really well written and fleshed out to where we either love them or hate them throughout the movie, depending on who the character is. But they all elicit an emotion from the viewer either way when you're watching this movie. Like, obviously, Frank, is not really that good of a guy. Julia is interesting because she kind of starts out as being maybe a little bit more sympathetic, but then halfway through the movie, we don't really like her all that much. It kind of goes from Julia to Christy a little bit, and she's the one that we end up following and kind of root for as the movie goes on. Her dad is sort of a character that's just kind of oblivious to stuff. So it's really interesting. Like, all the characters are different. They're definitely not the carbon cutouts you get in a lot of horror movies, especially slasher movies. They all have personality. They all have their own specific thing that sort of drives them either positively or negatively, depending on the viewer's experience. But they're ultimately what drives this first Hellraiser movie is the human characters. And Christopher Figg and Clive Barker do a really good job. Clive Barker specifically in writing the movie from the book, The Hellbound Heart, and breathing life into these human characters. Those are the things I really wasn't expecting that makes the original Hellraiser go above and beyond just sort of a torture horror movie or just like a violent horror movie for the sake of being violent. That's not really the case with this movie. Yes, it has a lot of blood and gore. Yes, it has a lot of violence, but it's not just for the sake of having them. It actually ties into a story and a narrative and human characters that are very compelling. So yeah, those are the biggest things. I think the performances by all these characters, the performances by the actors and actresses in this movie are all really solid. Especially Doug Bradley, of course, as Pinhead. You totally buy him, even though he's not on screen as much as I was expecting the first time I saw this movie. It was reiterated in my most recent watch. When he's on screen, he demands he's got that screen presence that just demands your attention. And also, I think Claire Higgins as Julia is probably the best human character because, like said, she's kind of sort of an ambiguous character from the beginning of this movie to the end. At the beginning, we're not really sure about her. We know she's a little bit distant from her husband and daughter-in-law, but we don't know if she's a good or bad character. By the end, we know. So I thought she did. I thought Claire Higgins probably did the best job in terms of, but I mean, really across the board, I thought everybody was pretty good. Ashley Lawrence as Christy Cotton in her first big role in a movie, I thought was solid. Yeah, I got nothing bad to say about the performances. I thought they were effective and really good. Um, the look and the design of the Cenobites is really great in this movie. Very 80s, but they're not done like terribly. They're creepy and also very interesting. They're hard to take your eyes off of them. They're kind of captivating from a visual standpoint. Creepy and alluring is what I wrote down, but it's hard not to be captivated by them visually. So, yeah, I really like the design of the Cenobites, especially for that time frame, the late 80s. Um, Got to talk about Christopher Young's score. It really is one of the best horror scores of any movie that I've ever seen, any horror movie I've ever seen. It's just so epic and so like almost opera, just on such a grand scale. Like when you hear this movie, when you hear this music in the movie, you're very captivated by it. You're enthralled by it. It's very grandiose, if you will, and just a very epic score, very moody, incredibly effective for this type of story and the type of atmosphere in this horror movie. It just really works for this movie. So yeah, the score is definitely one of my top pros for this movie. Obviously, the practical gore and blood effects are really solid in this movie, very believable and enjoyable, especially again 1987, 86, 87, at the time that this movie was made. They hold up really well even today. Yeah, there's you're not gonna be disappointed if you're a blood or a gore hound. There's plenty of blood in this movie from beginning to end. Lots of gore, a lot of cool. At one point early in the movie, there's a character that gets ripped apart with chains and hooks and everything, and you see like pieces of his face on the floor, and I thought that was very effective. It's not to say everything works. We'll get into that with my cons, but um, for the most part, the blood and the gore and the makeup effects work really well. Finally, the movie I think is really well paced with a great moody and dark slash bleak atmosphere. I mean, this isn't necessarily a fun horror movie. It's not in the same vein as like Fright Night or Creep Show or horror anthology from Amicus or something like that. This is a pretty heavy movie to watch. It's very different. It takes itself very seriously. It's very sadomasochistic, obviously, dark. And even at the end of the movie, it's not like we have a great resolution but nobody really comes out on top in this movie, quite frankly. Even our survivors. So, yeah, but it's really well paced. I didn't have a hard time getting through it at all. It's an effective 91-minute runtime for the first Hellraiser, and that was just right, I thought. And then finally, of course, this is a horror movie that has iconic quotable lines from Pinhead, which are just iconic. You're never going to forget them, like, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering. Probably my favorite. Also, of course, you have will tear your soul apart. Of course, I can't do it as good as Doug Bradley. I'm not trying to. Um, there's some other ones that I'm forgetting. Those are the most notable ones. will tear your soul apart. Hopefully, I can get him to personalize an autograph with that one, or no tears, please. It's a waste of good stuff. Well, probably that's probably going to be too long. I'll just have him say, "We'll tear your soul apart." Hopefully, he'll personalize it for me. But yeah, those are my pros for Hellraiser from 1987. Getting into some cons, and there's not a whole lot, but some of the effects at the end of the movie, the last 5 minutes, this is what I was mentioning before when I was talking about the practical gore effects and stuff. But some of the effects, the last 5 minutes of the movie, mostly having to do with like the puzzle box or the puzzle configuration and sort of the light and the zapping around it as she's trying to reverse the puzzle box and get rid of the Cenobites. Those effects really haven't aged well at all. They look very very cheesy, very cheap, pretty bad and silly. And I think that was more of it was more from budgetary constraints. I mean, this movie was made for $1 million, which sounds like a lot, but in 1987, it really that wasn't even a lot back then to a large extent. Obviously, today it's hardly anything for a horror movie, especially a studio produced horror movie. But so yeah, I'm going to chalk it up to budgetary constraints, but those effects really do look bad. Also, the monster that we get that chases Christie midway through the movie in the hospital, I think the monster's known as the Engineer. They show too much of him to where it really does not look good from a practical effects standpoint. I think they focus on him a little too much, and some of that might have been transfer. Maybe it didn't look that good when this movie came out in '87 on the screens, but now we can see a little too much of him, so it kind of ages badly. Also, the winged creature that morphs from the homeless guy at the end of the movie, who's been following Christie throughout the movie, by the way, that's not really a great practical effect look, and it's really not a strong way to end the movie. It kind of reminds us that it was a lower budgetary effects budget constraint there. So those are a couple things when it comes to the effects that haven't aged all that well. And then my final con, and this might just be a personal one, it's really not one of the great rewatchable horror movies. As I said before, with it's sort of got a very bleak and dark mood and atmosphere, and it's just not. I mean, it's not a movie on a Friday night. If I want to sit down and watch a fun horror movie and have a good time with, I'm probably not going to choose Hellraiser from 1987. That's not to say that it's not a great horror movie, because it certainly is. But it's kind of one of those movies. At least for me, I kind of would have to be in the mood for some sadomasochistic kind of stuff, which I don't know how often I'm in the mood for that, but. Anyway, everybody knows this is a great horror movie. Very different, very well done by Clive Barker. Great characters, human characters that drive it with a great Cenobite design led by Pinhead and Doug Bradley, who does a phenomenal job. A lot of great gore and blood and makeup effects. So, yeah, it's hard not to give this movie anything less than a 9 out of 10. And that's what I'm going to give it for a review. And my rating is going to be 9 out of 10 for the original Hellraiser from 1987. Phenomenal movie. I'm excited to see the actors slash actress that are going to be at this horror convention, Days of the Dead in Las Vegas. Especially Doug Bradley. I definitely want an autograph from him, not just because he's like the lead of this franchise, but also he's getting up there in age, and you don't know how many more of these he's going to do. So I don't know if I'm going to bring this to have him sign. It's not. I don't know if it's really going to lend itself to a good signature. I probably will just use one of the prints that they have at the table there, and like I said, hopefully I'll have him personalize it to say something like "No tears, please" or "We'll tear your soul apart." Probably that one, because I think it's a little bit more iconic. But he's got a lot of iconic lines. So anyway, 9 out of 10. The original Hellraiser, great horror movie. Go ahead and comment down below if you guys have seen and what you think of the original Hellraiser from 1987. Do you like it? Not? Why? Why not? Please like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews and other videos for this series in February here. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel as well so you don't miss not only the rest of this series, including me coming live from Vegas and giving you a day's summary each day that I'm there, but also my future horror series that I have coming up throughout the rest of the year. So thank you for watching this first movie review in this series. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope you enjoyed this review, and stay scared. Bye.